You're live, Your Worship.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Clerk. Good afternoon, members of council and members of our staff and members of the public that may be tuning in. This is our special council meeting. It's Wednesday, January the 19th, 2022. And we are having a special council meeting. It's called the Budget Workshop number 3. So we have a pretty straightforward agenda. There will be a portion at the end of our meeting where we will be going to an in-camera session, but we're going to move ahead with our budget workshop first, and then council will recess into an in-camera later on. So I would like to start the meeting then with our land acknowledgement. Again, like I said, it's recently passed, and it's always optional to say this, but I find it important to say, so I'm going to say the land acknowledgement. We'd like to begin our meeting by recognizing the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada as traditional stewards and caretakers of the land. We acknowledge that Clearview Township is located within the boundaries of Treaty 18, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Titatanati, and the Wendat, and is the home of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people as part of an intricate nationhood that reaches across Turtle Island. At this time of truth and reconciliation, we welcome the opportunity to work together towards new understandings and new relationships and ask for guidance in all that we do. Council, I'd like to go directly to our agenda. So approval of the agenda. Again, the agenda has been amended and been published on our website. So I'll read that. Be it resolved that Council of the Township of Clearview hereby approve the Budget Workshop number 3, agenda dated January 19, 2022. As presented, I'll look for a mover and second. Mr. Broderick and Ms. Dean, thank you very much. Any questions? I'll call the motion. All those in favor? And the agenda is approved. Item 2 is disclosure, pecuniary interest, and general nature thereof. If anybody has any disclosures, please let us know. If anything comes up during the meeting, please bring it forward. We'll deal with it immediately. Okay, so we're going to move to item number 3, which is our budget overview and presentation. Our Kelly McDonald is our treasurer, and she has prepared some projections. Hello, Kelly. There she is. Thank you for joining us. She and her team, her staff, have prepared a full presentation with an outline of where we have been and how we got here. And I look forward to hearing it. And I want to acknowledge that it's always evolving, isn't it, Kelly? It seems to change every time there's another announcement or something coming from the province. So nevertheless, I appreciate your diligence in keeping track of it for us, Kelly. Kelly, I'll pass it over to you. Do you have the presentation, or is that coming from Sasha?
Thank you, Worship. Sasha has graciously volunteered to be the presentation coordinator.
Perfect. Okay, well, I'll hand it over to you, Kelly.
Thank you very much. And Sasha, and you can start the slideshow anytime you're ready. There we go. So welcome, everybody. This is our final scheduled meeting for the 2022-2023 Clearview Township budget. I'm going to do a brief presentation, just updating council with any of the changes that have come through since the public meeting. And then I will pass it back to council and his worship for your discussion period. Next slide, please. So we're still at the same position. We are still funding 1.6 million in funding from taxation for capital and 17 million in funding from taxation for operating. These are the same figures that were presented at the public meeting. Next slide, please. So way back in November, we started with a Clearview increase of 9.14 and a net tax increase of 4.74. Next slide. So with the council changes that were made, we went to our November 29th meeting with a net increase of 5.01. Next slide. And then on December 13th, when we presented to the public, we also had the county numbers in as a finalized number, and that put us at 3.36%. Next slide. Now, our most exciting news that we got this year was we had been budgeting our growth to come in around 200,000, and it actually came in at $500,485. So that's where you see the change on this slide. And our current net projected tax increase is 2.44. So that's the amount of dollars requested from taxation has increased by 2.44%. So when we went to the public meeting, we had several points come in from the public as requests. Sorry, this is just what we went to the public with. So the net changes from council were the $200,000 reduction, 150 from the affordable senior housing, and the removal of the speed signs of $50,000. Next slide. And again, at the public meeting, we presented a $37.20 increase per $100,000 of assessed value. With our new figures, next slide, please. That number has now been reduced to $27 for each $100,000 of assessed value. And final slide. These are the points, the main points that affected the budget that came out of the public meeting. We had several requests for the speed reduction signs to be placed back in the budget. We had a request for transit fares to be increased. We had a request on the way the tax percentage was shown. And we had a request from the Sunnydale Street residents for more help with the sewer project. Next slide. That's our brief update. If council has any specifics that they would like me to bring up on screen, please ask. But at this point, I'd like to turn it back to the mayor and open it up for council discussion.
Okay, Kelly, you ripped through that at lightning speed, and thank you for that. I would ask if I could, before I go to members of council, can I have you bring up the last slide again, showing the January 19th? Sasha, could you put up the last slide showing the figures from the 19th? Just today, of course. Just
6 slides back.
There you go. Keep going.
It'll be the last colorful slide.
That's the one. Sasha. There you go. Thank you very much. Oh, so Kelly, just for a complete understanding as to what we're looking at here, this is a slim or a condensed version of all of the calculations that go into various departments, as well as all of the outside influences that impact Clearview Township. In the blue box is the Clearview tax increase estimated. So to answer question number 3 that was put forward by the public, it is clearly delineated right there as to what that is. Then there's the OPP, and then there's the Simcoe County tax increase, and then there's the education increase. So those are very clearly laid out. The net tax increase, Kelly, can you explain why this is calculated in such a way that we show it as a net tax increase?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we've always presented all of the numbers, whether it was the Clearview Township increase or the policing increase or the county increase. The bottom line is what is actually going to affect the taxpayer's tax bill. So when I calculate out the estimated tax rates, there'll be a 2.44% increase. The rates don't add up in a column. They're blended based on our assessment, and the average tax increase will be 2.44%.
Okay. And then the next item, which is still on this page, I wanted you to mention again, the base increase from new growth. And you received that information. Can you explain that a little more detailed about why that information is either delayed in this process or how you use that to help you make this final calculation?
Absolutely, Your Worship. So there's a big difference between assessment growth and actual new growth. Assessment growth is your original assessment on your house was $100,000. MPAC has gone through and reassessed them to more current value dollars, and it's now worth $200,000. So while that shows as $100,000 growth in your investment on your home, it doesn't actually calculate into our numbers because our tax dollars are based on the entire assessment. What the new growth is if you had a piece of vacant land and in this tax roll year, it has now got a house on it. And that is now picked up as brand new assessment. So it's not something that was reassessed or revaluated. It's something that's brand new to our roll. So we have in effect $500,000 worth of brand new taxation dollars from brand new homes.
Okay, that helps me a lot, and I appreciate you reviewing this for us. So those are all the comments that I have. So I would like to, if maybe Sasha could just take this down, and that way I could see all members of council. If anybody have any questions to Kelly of her presentation, please bring forward your cards and I'll look for it. Hello, Mr. McKechnie. Councillor McKechnie, you please go right ahead. Are you there?
Sorry, a delay. I'm using the old computer here. So
Okay,
anyway,
no problem.
So as you know, I've got a couple of amendments I would like to see. But before I get into that, just that funding that we got from the province there, the extra $600,000. Where is that shown in the budget? Where are we? Where is that put into the budget anyway?
Yeah, so we receive the OCIF funding pretty well
Right.
every year, and it was bumped up significantly this year. Kelly, can you help the councillor out on that?
Through your worship to Councillor McKechnie, we've not incorporated that funding into the budget yet. The OCIF funding is sort of earmarked for one-time infrastructure projects. We have covered off all of our infrastructure projects using the existing OCIF, but we do have that in a reserve fund to cover off projects that we see coming up that are going to be quite expensive.
Okay, thank you.
Is that helpful, councillor? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just looking at the budget and I couldn't see it, so I didn't realize it wasn't sort of included. So, no, that's good. Thank you.
Again, as I said at the opening, we get these surprise announcements that are quite grateful that we receive from the province of Ontario, and that has to be incorporated into the calculations. But the best thing for the Treasury Department, when they get these type of funds that were not expected, they can just put them into a reserve and hold them there. And then that way council or staff can, make some recommendations, and council can then access it and apply it where needed. So it's very helpful for sure. Does that help?
Yeah, no, that's good. And I have a couple of amendments, but I'll wait till the appropriate time. So
thank you very much, councillor. Any other councillors with questions to Kelly and staff? Hello, Tom. Mr. Patterson, how are you?
I'm good. Just a general question, because it will come up with the various additional requests. Do we have sufficient funds now in our operating budget for speed reduction signs, or do we have to consider through this process a bump up, an increase?
Okay, Kelly, you want to start with that, and then maybe over to John Ferguson. Kelly?
Through your worship to Councillor Patterson, the existing budget right now is for existing speed signs, replacements, things like that. The money that was originally put back in by Public Works of $50,000, I believe, would be an additional capital expenditure because it would be brand new signs. And again, that would be a council decision.
Thank you. Mayor, can we go over to John Ferguson, the CAO? I'd like to ask him if he could help respond to that question, whether we have enough funding in that account.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So we often take money from the operational budget or taxation, and we put it into a capital reserve for certain projects. We've been doing that to help with some of the equipment that needs to be purchased in Dan's budget. So we have a budget that can be used for sign replacement. In that portion of the budget is approximately $30,000. But what we would do is if we spent some of that money, and let's say the entire budget didn't need to get spent that year, then we would have it in the budget. If we exceed the demand on $30,000, for example, and we need to do other work that was planned outside of the traffic signs or the speed signs, then we can draw from the ICF fund and put it in the budget to carry out what qualifies under the OCIF fund for other capital projects. So I guess what I'm saying is, just as Measures mentioned earlier, you can draw from that reserve to replenish if needed. So we discussed this yesterday, and we don't think the demand on the equipment will be as high this year. We're not sure. So we believe that we can draw from that account, and if we need the money, we can draw from the OCIF. So what I'm saying is that you have the means within the budget to do so. But what we would have to do is, let's say, for example, we picked 4 roads out of the many roads in the county that may have a speed reduction, and there may be a recommendation from the engineers to move in that direction. Staff would have to cost that work for putting the reduced speed signs up, and come back with a report describing that. That's the transparent piece for the public. We have to come back with that report, and we would also have the draft bylaw ready to proceed. At that point in time, council would then make a decision on the recommendation, and it's not an option. It would be a recommendation to council to proceed. Council would either support it or not. That would be in council's discretion. So right now, our objective from our discussions yesterday, and we could entertain a motion from council to make sure that this happens, and I'll describe that in a second. But we would plan to have spend in the vicinity of 30,000 this year. And if we didn't get all the projects done, we could put them into next year. Or if there was enough money this year that we could do it, we could come back and make those decisions. We still have the flexibility in the budget. So our goal is really for council to direct staff to come back with the exact costing within the reports and have the draft bylaw ready and have that early spring and ready for the capital season to get those signs installed. So that would be our process. And that way we don't have to go back and rescind a vote that took 50,000 out of the budget. We can work within the budget. We think we have the means to do so. And the OCIF funding can help us with our flexibility.
All right. So, John, I appreciate that. And I also acknowledge Dan has joined us. Hello, Dan. Councillor Patterson, you wanted to follow up with something there, did you? Or did you have another question?
Yeah, I did. So just, I guess, more procedural than right now. So as you know, there will be requests during this session to add speed signs into the budget. Do we use that as the trigger as we're accumulating requests to then trigger the motion that you just discussed? Or do you want to do this sort of now or at the end of the process?
Yeah, part of the issue is I think that gets lost when you approve it as just a line item in the budget, and then you can spend. It means you don't have to come back to council. This process means that we come back to council with the official report that's transparent for the public to see, and then the bylaw at the same time. So you could do it either way, but we thought because the 50,000 was taken out of the budget, you didn't want to go back and revisit that we thought that we would take this approach. Council still has to vote on it. Council has to vote to transfer from the reserves, but all that can be laid out for council. If council gives us the instruction to do that today by resolution, then that's what we will do.
So if I can, just so everyone's clear, we're at item 3 on the agenda today in this workshop session. So we're talking about the overall presentation that the treasurer has presented to us. And I feel that we're going down the road talking about some specifics that are actually in section 4 of our agenda. So I would ask if there's any member of council with any other questions of any other parts of Kelly's presentation, which frankly covers the entire budget of the entire community. So members of council, do you have anything further on item number 3 of our agenda? Yes, Tom.
Okay, just as a matter of general information now, I personally do not have any motions in this regard, but I know we've had several discussions with Public Works about traffic calming policy and the effort to do some of that, even if it's a pilot in 2022, and presumably would continue into 2023. So a similar question I had is, do we feel now, maybe this question would be best put to Dan, because Dan and I have talked about this briefly. Do we have sufficient funding in the traffic calming policy source funding to do some of the things we've talked about? Or is there something that we have to talk about today in section 4 to increase that amount should council want to do that on specifics?
And that's a good question. And I appreciate the way you phrase that, because I'd like us to acknowledge the work that our treasury has done to put together the entire budget. And if there are any categories that anybody has to bring up, that'd be great. So you've brought up back to the sign issue. So back to Mr. Ferguson. Is there sufficient funds? I think you outlined 30,000 or something is in there right now. Is that a common number?
There's sufficient funds. And why we're gauging it this way is that if we don't get a demand on some of the equipment issues that we normally get, we think there may be a less demand this year, then we may not have to transfer much money from the OCIF to make anything up. So it will be within budget. So for Dan's perspective, if there's other items that he's flagged in his budget that need to be done, he's going to be able to do that because we're not going to let that fall. We're going to replace that with OCIF funding. We'll be back here with those exact dollars when it occurs. But we think if we may be lucky enough to not even have to do that, we may be able to use that 30,000 without any major difficulty this year. If we do, we're going to go back and come talk to you about the OCIF.
So
Which is in our reserves. It's not in our budget, but it's in our reserves. It'll be mentioned in our budget process, though.
Right. So at this point, so to help Tom answer a question to Councillor Patterson, and that is that the objective here is to try to keep our tax increases as low as possible. So we have the ability through procedures and through direction of council that can be done at a council meeting, not a council workshop meeting. We have the ability to move monies from the OCIF into funding of these type of projects if necessary. So that's the part that I wanted to make sure everybody understood as council, that while we're in the budget workshop, we're looking at the overall budget. We have a account of which Dan is the senior manager responsible for the traffic signage account. And he has some hopes that he'll have a good year this year. And if he finds, as a result of motions from council, that he may exceed what's in that account, he'll of course flag that to his colleague, the treasurer. The treasurer and the deputy director will meet with the CAO, and they will come forward with a motion at council then that we can receive and make a decision on what to do with some of that OCIF funding. To be clear, the OCIF funding is actually for full infrastructure works, right? That's really what it's for. But it does qualify in a minor way to assist us with these type of activities, because in a minor way, a sign is actually infrastructure. So you could make that argument in a small way. I mean, although I wouldn't want to go to the province and ask them for a grant for signs. I think that there's other things we should be asking for. But the point is that it is part of our infrastructure. So hopefully that helps Councillor Patterson, that we're in the right boat. We did receive a bump up, and that does put us into a favorable position in the fact that we have all the right procedures in place and we have the ability to do what council wishes. Councillor Patterson, I saw you flag again. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. That's a global explanation, but I'm trying to. This is separate from the speed reduction.
Okay.
We are moving in 2022, as Dan has outlined in the past, and as we've approved, that we are going to try to adopt some traffic calming policies, whether it's paint or a speed platform or bollards and that sort of thing. And that was my specific area, similar to the speed reduction. But in that other effort that we're doing, does Dan feel comfortable proceeding without asking staff or council for any more appropriations to do what he thinks is necessary? I've named a couple. I'm sure council will do it, and I think if we do one or two trials, the community will start to liven up to this, and we'll probably get requests throughout the year. That's why I'm asking the question.
That's a good question, and I'll tell you what. Let's go to Dan, if I may, through the CAO. John, you can jump in if you need to, but Dan, how do you feel about that account? Are you comfortable to be able to perform some of those traffic calming directions that council has given you?
Your worship, yeah, it's trying to wrap my head around it. In the and I think I stated it before, but in the past, the $30,000 that's in the Public Works capital budget was put there many years ahead of my days as being here, and they were mainly budget was mainly used to purchase equipment, specifically those speed display signs. You know, I think we've done well in supplying many of the hamlets and villages within the township with sufficient amount of signs, and we do have some that we move around from time to time. Leaving that amount in the budget and carrying it over year, it was my intent for this year to, as Councillor Patterson put it, is to purchase traffic calming equipment. So that would again be a capital purchase of speed tables, speed humps, delineators, you know, those types of things. And they would be a capital purchase for the municipality that we could use in various locations as we build upon that. My view is that, you know, on the operational side, which was typically where our signs are purchased through, is the operational side. And that's why it was that $50,000 was put in the operating budget. It's still a taxation, whether it's taxation for in the operation side or taxation on the capital side. From what John is saying is that to purchase that infrastructure, the capital infrastructure, you know, we could use that money to purchase signs as well. You know, the speed display signs, they were about $6,000-7,000 each, so they're quite expensive. The speed bumps or humps, whatever you want to call them, they're quite expensive as well, because you need to buy quite a few to put across the road to make it effective. They're not quite as expensive as the speed display sign, so it's I'm unsure yet on how many I'm going to need the first go round. So depending on that is where we would sit with the you know, the remainder of the funds that would be available to purchase those signs if council were to move ahead with speed reduction. I hope that explains a bit.
It does for me. It does for me, Dan, and I appreciate, because council and Clearview have made some significant investments in those speed radar signs. They are populating across our roadways, and they're providing us service. And I can also appreciate that some of them may need some maintenance. I can think of one right now. I know that's not functioning. That's not far from my house, but nevertheless, you know, they do have, you know, occasional repair or maintenance or service that needs to be done to them. Does that type of service money come out of a different account? Is that from just operating, or is that still being used, this account, to pay for that type of work?
Through your worship, no, I would say that then that would, the maintenance of those would come from operational. So
Okay,
it would go into our signs and signals GL code. We have a signs and signals that would cover off, you know, replacement of any signs or the signal lights, like our signal lights that we have in town in Stainer. You know, that comes out of the operating part of it. And yeah, I think of two that need some servicing. I think they're just batteries, but otherwise, you know, that's where that would come out. So in my mind, in my experience, the purchasing of equipment or you know, real items, when it is comes from capital. Once you purchase that, then you have to factor in the operation or the maintenance side of those things. So
okay. So to circle back then to Councillor Patterson's question, you feel that you have enough funds to get you going on some of the direction that council has already given. And as we move forward in the process of dealing with some of the questions about speed reduction, you can do reports through the CAO that have an outline of the actual values for each of these projects, and they can be described. Is that what you're thinking? I'll go to John to help me answer that one. John?
Yeah, I think Dan had a great explanation. I'm going to try to simplify it in how these budgets can work and how we can draw from one reserve of this OCIF funding and put it in a budget so that it helps us meet all our obligations. So the object, if council approves this, because we have to bring it back for council to approve it, we're saying, yes, we have the money and we have a source of money to make that happen. So yes, to Councillor Patterson's comment, there will be money available for that. So we take money from taxation. I think it's about $287,000, and we put it in a capital budget associated with Dan's comments. So the money came from taxation, but it's now put in a capital budget. So there's various capital items under that $287,000 that would meet qualifications of the OCIF funding. So our goal is that if we were short in areas that might not be caught under the OCIF, we can change our mind about our own money, but then we would have to replenish that amount in order to meet our full obligations if they're to be met this year. And right now, we're not sure if the demand will be high on those items for Dan, but it might be. And if it is, that's where we'll be coming back and asking for the transfers to go back into that fund so that he can meet those obligations.
Right.
So the answer is yes, the money will be there, but it's always council's decision.
Absolutely. And that actually brings me to the last point I'd like to make, if I can, on this discussion item. And that is that our objective is always to have balanced budgets. And so that means that each of our accounts need to be balanced, and the senior managers from various departments are responsible to provide that information. And I know that the treasurer will want to make sure that we deliver balanced budgets and balanced accounts. So that's where if council makes a request and the senior managers notes that there is not enough funding, that we can use some of our tools to access funds that can meet the requests of council. Is that helpful, everybody? Tom, I'd like to go back to you. Did you anything further on that discussion? Okay.
Thank you for that.
All right. Okay, Kelly, you're not off the hook yet here. I haven't left this item. Item 3, anything further for Kelly, members of council, for her presentation and the work that she's been doing? All right, I do have one final question that it was kind of related to the point that I brought up about assessments. After we get through this process, we give the treasurer direction to go ahead and prepare the final budget. You will continually be updating the information, and it may in fact come in a little changed yet again. I mean, we expect that may happen. Is that right, Kelly?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. When I do the final tax rate calculations and the final tax rate bylaw, I can report back to council with the actual increase. Until we get to that point, these are always estimates.
Yeah.
We usually do come in at least a little bit lower than our projected tax increase.
Well, historically, we've had some great opportunity to do that, and we hope that we continue that. So thank you, Kelly. If there's nothing further, council, on item number 3, nobody has any further questions, then we're going to go directly to item number 4, which is where councillors will have the opportunity to bring any proposed motions or any opportunities that they'd like. I see Councillor Deneen. So we're going to do that. I think that the clerk would like anything to be done in a form of a motion. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. That is correct.
Okay, so Councillor Deneen, you're the first one up with the flag. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to try this on for size, and I'm sorry, but and Sasha, this is not what I've relayed to you previously. I'd like to make a motion to ask staff to prepare a report regarding the exact costing for the speed reduction implementations approved by council on October 5th, 2021. And for these costs to be funded not from taxation, but from operational funds as deemed appropriate by staff, and to bring a report back to council for the March 7th council meeting.
Okay, Councillor, I appreciate that. That's really close to kind of the topics that we were talking about just a moment ago. Can I, before I even look for a seconder, I'll go to the CAO. Is this something that we can even achieve between now and March?
I would say around March, because it's going to have to be early spring if we're going to get that tender out to purchase items that council will likely, or their choice, to approve. Councillor Deneen's motion is very similar to the recommendation that we're making, and that we would bring those from the report, what we think can be afforded in this year. And if council wants to find other money, they would have to direct us to do it, but we'll find what we can afford this year. And then come back here with the exact information, the costing, the timelines, the bylaws that all have to go with it. And council then approves or disapproves at that point in time, and we go from there.
All right, so that's good review on procedure. Counselor, thank you. I'll look, is there a seconder on the motion, on Counselor Dineen's motion? Counselor Patterson. All right, and did you want to speak? I saw your yellow card. Did you want to speak on that, Tom? Okay, I think you're muted there, sir.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Just a point of clarification. I'm presuming from Councillor Dineen's presentation that she's referring to the speed reductions. Is that
Councillor
correct?
Dineen.
Sorry, I probably read that a little quickly. And
Yeah, start again, if you don't mind.
Okay. A motion to ask staff to prepare a report regarding the exact costing for the speed reduction implementations approved by council on October 5th, 2021, and for these costs not to be funded from taxation, but from operational funds as deemed appropriate by staff, and to bring a report back to council for the I have March 7th, but I'm open to suggestions. Thanks.
All right, Councillor Patterson, go ahead.
So that's what I heard. And what I interpret from that, or what I take from that, is you're saying all of the reductions. And so you've included what I might ask for, what Councillor McKechnie might be asking for, what you might ask for. So since I understand that, did we not get? I'm going to ask the word. What do you mean by exact funding? And that's because CAO Ferguson mentioned the same expression. The exact funding. Do we not know enough about that now? Why would we be waiting for March meeting? We had a submission under their first request, which was 50,000. What else would you do to meet
Tom,
the request?
Tom, just through the mayor to you, Councillor Patterson, I have just in my conversations and even the last 24 hours, I've gotten different amounts for different projects just from different people, because I've had things told to me at different times.
Okay.
And I believe we had that conversation as
you're
well.
referring to that conversation as well. Okay.
Yes. And that already might have been a different cost. So exact costing would be just to re-look at things and bring an amount back. And then at that time, rather than take it out of taxation, once we have an exact amount that they think they can work with for those implementations, then they can let us know, and we can just, they'll let us know where it would be appropriate to get those funds from. And it would just save a lot of motions today where I'm hearing from staff and others that it doesn't have to be in these budget deliberations to do that sort of a project, but that's just my take on it. If somebody else can come up with something different, that's just my interpretation. Thanks.
If I'd like to speak on one point there, Councillor Janine, and that is correct. This is the budget workshop, so we're talking about the entire budget for the whole town. And this is the opportunity for councillors to bring forward recommendations that they want in the budget. And yet some of the work that you're asking is actually work that can be done in a council session. So as the CAO pointed out, a report can be generated which will outline a specific, very accurate or very detailed locations of any type of speed reductions that have been part of this recommendation that can give an exact cost, and then an exact bylaw can then be also attached to that. So that's in the next step. So while it's a good motion right now and it's a good discussion point, particularly because the third or fourth paragraph of your recommendation talks about where the funding comes from, that's why it's really relevant to our budget discussion here. If I can go to the CAO, he put up his hand. Yes, go ahead, John.
Yeah, just help clarify, because in Councillor Dean's motion, she mentions she doesn't want it. She doesn't want the money to come from taxation. She wants it to come from the operational budget. And correct me if I'm mistaken, Councillor Dean, through you, Your Worship. What you mean is that you don't want that to come from increased taxes that would have to be voted on for the 50,000. You're asking that we take it from the existing operational budget that we've presented today,
Councillor
as
Denis.
opposed to increasing the taxes.
Phyllis, go ahead.
I don't want it to come from taxation. I don't want it increasing the budget, but what you were speaking of, and I'm sorry if I misunderstood, if it came back to council at a later date, at that point in time, we might be able to access some of the OCIF funding at that time.
I'm saying that you can access the OSC funding. It's your decision. And if you direct us to proceed in the way that we're suggesting, and we use the operational budget to see if there's any flexibility this year, that means we're using the existing approved budget. If some of the demands aren't as high, then we may not have to go back and even ask for OCIF funding. We may be able to cover it within a 30,000 budget range for some of the projects this year. If we exceed it and some of the projects come in that Dan needs to do, we'll have to go to the OCIF and make those transfers so that we can get the projects done that we say that we want to do. So we already have a resolution from October. So if we follow that process, 30,000 won't do them all in 1 year, but it could do many this year there's not many projects, but it'll do most of them this year. And perhaps some could be put off next year. Or if we have extra money, then council can make a decision on that as well. What we would be looking for, so that this doesn't end up being a $50,000 decision to add to the budget and add another percentage to what the taxation would be, we're suggesting that we could do this without increasing the budget. And this is how we would do it. Now, thankfully, we got OCIF funding in the interim between these matters that gives us that flexibility, but we want to use it cautiously because our capital projects are demanding. They're going to continue to be demanding going forward. So we're trying to protect that 600,000. We've already earmarked about 100,000 for other important projects this year. So $500,000 needs to be a benefit to the whole community. And our objective is to try to do that as much as possible. So we will draw on that if we need it. But again, depending on the demands this year, if we're able to do it within our existing budget, we may not have to. So it's an efficient approach to this project, keeping the costs within budget.
Okay, so what I'm understanding from that is that my motion would just deplete Dan's operational fund at this point, and then he would have to ask for more money every time he wanted to do something. Is that what I'm taking from that?
No.
I would
No?
disagree. Actually, it's not every time. It's just that if he feels that the account is drawing down to the point where he cannot fulfill a council direction. And by the way, this goes for any members of our senior staff. If any other departments draw down and they have direction of council that they need to follow, that they would then obviously notify the treasurer that they're concerned, and they would try to, balance that account. And they can do that by bringing a recommendation through the CAO's office to council to ask us to draw from the OCIF fund.
Okay.
Sir Kalmke, you're comfortable with the way I answered that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that's exactly correct. I liken it to when Terry came back to council regarding the Stayner Downtown Improvement Project. He
Right.
had to ask council for additional funding and earmark where that funding would come from, and council had to approve that. So in the same instance with Dan, if he came back to council and noticed that his funding was depleted, he would then ask council if he could use the OCIF funding, and at that point council would make that decision.
Perfect.
Okay. So would you like me to withdraw my motion?
I'm going to put it to Tom. He's just put up his card, so just hold on that. Go ahead, Tom.
No, absolutely not. this principle here, first of all, my motions refer exactly to the same thing, but in an individual case. Okay, and I think this council is moving towards a much more mindful and a much more accountable process in all the decision we're making when it's backed by studies and the kind of discussion that we just talked about now. So I appreciate the fact that Councillor Deneen brought the whole notion back, because it preserves the integrity of the decisions we made on October 5th.
Yes.
Okay, that also recognizes that we do have a limitation on how much money we need to spend. So we're trying to be responsible with our taxation money. And it also takes advantages of when we have additional funds that are available to us from the province. We use them judiciously. So I like the process. Some may be listening to this and are anxious whether or not speed reduction will happen, but this is a process that I'm very comfortable with. Everything is discussed in totality without favoritism between, one section or another, or one group versus another. So I wholeheartedly second this and support it. Now, the question is, where does the rest of council sit on this? Because there was various ways and means that we discussed the last time to sort of respond to public opinion. And I agree with this notion. And this process we outlined also affords for public engagement, because we're doing it in a council meeting and doing it quite transparently. So I'm prepared to vote on this with the understanding that the October 5th speed reductions that we approved and are still approved are the subject of our discussion, and it does not increase the taxes. The objective is, let's put it this way, the objective is that it does not increase our taxation demand.
Okay, first of all, Councillor Patterson, thank you very much for your endorsement that council is moving in a direction that's utilizing all the tools available to us. I think the other aspect that I'll just as an aside and maybe an editorial in that dimension, that I think that we're understanding how our budget works better for us in all of aspects and all parts of Clearview Township. And I think that that's been really a positive experience. And I want to give credit to our staff and our CAO for being innovative in coming up with some of these ideas and how they can do it. And so I appreciate that. And I also appreciate hearing from the public. So I think I agree with you, and thank you for the endorsement on that. The second point, though, I'd like to point out is that while the motions were passed at a traffic workshop, they are motions to council for sure. And the direction from Councillor Deneen's motion would then ask our public works staff through the CAO to bring forward recommendations on each individual project, not the entire project, but each individual project. So bylaws would then be created through the clerk's office, which would then establish each of these zone areas that need to be done. And so a motion and then a bylaw for each one would then be presented to give a total value to meet the ask which Councillor Deneen has asked for. So I think that's where it needs to go, because passing it all in one big sweep is not asking for, or is not giving respect to the input we've received from members of the public, and we need to reassess some of these as well to make sure that we're doing them correctly. As we all know, we do have a traffic calming policy that's in front of us that does have a little bit of ambiguity to it, and a couple of areas that are perhaps outside of the actual responsibility of a rural community. So we need to have a look at that and maybe make some value judgments as council on how we react to those. So listen, I see some cards. I want to go back to Ms. Deneen first, because she had mentioned about withdrawing, and I'm asking, are you still doing that or not?
No, I'll see where it goes. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I just wanted to check with you on that first. Councillor McKechnie, I'll go to you next, because you haven't had a chance on this, and Tom's had a few, so go ahead, Doug.
So I'm a little bit confused here. So if Councillor Deneen's motion passes, where does that leave the amendments that I would like to put forward tonight, and maybe others too, Councillor Patterson, maybe, are we still able to put those motions forward, or or not. So. Because I understand Councillor Deneen talking about going back to October the 5th and the whole, and the whole thing. Whereas, my motions have to do with just a couple of roads here, specific areas. So I'm just wondering, can I still put those amendments forward, propose those amendments?
To be honest, Councillor McKechnie, if Councillor Deneen's motion passes, it would be my interpretation that direction will be given to staff to go ahead and prepare information that would then be reflective upon some of the items that you've shared with council already. So I would think that you need to consider that your motion should be brought forward in a regular meeting of council, and or you'll see the results of the work of Mr. Perot as he puts together those individual recommendations. Does that make sense, Councillor McKechnie?
No.
Can you
explain it
I'll
again?
let someone else explain it.
Yeah.
CAO Ferguson, go ahead.
Okay.
So all the stuff that we intend to bring forward is based on the October recommendations, okay, with everybody's feedback. So our approach is we roughly know that we'll need speed reduction signs, I guess, every 600 kilometers or 600 meters as opposed to 500. And then there's sighting of them, and there's a bunch of other duties that have to occur. So we're ballparking what we think it is. Ultimately, we should be sending out a tender so that we know what the cost is. And so we'll be taking each project, knowing the kilometers. And this is just a small amount of kilometers in Clearview Township, by the way, so people are aware. This is not all of Clearview Township. It's certain sections of roads that are considered problematic that have come under the recommendations from the engineers. And so that includes, and I'm going by memory here, but that includes everything from concession 10 from 124 to 91 to other sections that in the vicinity of County Road 9, not on County Road 9, but the roads that lead to County Road 9, I think are part of those recommendations. Those recommendations also included line painting and other things. So our objective is to bring back what we think we can afford this year. We don't really want to exceed the $30,000 amount, but to see what we can do this year. And so roughly we know that concession 10 may be in the $10,000 to $12,000 range. Parts of concession 6 might be, $2,500 to $3,000. Parts of fairgrounds might be $2,500 to $3,000. We just need to come back with the specific information and give it to council based on the recommendations from the engineering report and council's input, because council added certain things to this. And so we're coming back with that, but with the full report and the draft, council can make a decision of whether they want to proceed or not at that point in time. But we're going with the intention that if you do proceed, we have the means without increasing the budget.
That's the point that I like to express, and that is that we're trying our best not to increase the budget, as in increase the impact on tax increases across our township.
Exactly.
We have increased the budget overall, as Kelly pointed out earlier here, is that we saw significant growth. So we're seeing more income coming into the township, but we're not seeing increases in actual taxation. So that's good. So we're getting there. Councillor McKechnie.
Oh, okay. I don't like it, but anyway, that's fine.
Councillor Patterson, I think your card was up earlier. Oh, Dan's there. Hi, Dan. You need to get a card. We got to talk about that. All the staff need to have them. Then I can definitely see you. Mr. Pro, go ahead.
But 2 years too late, maybe.
Yeah, I know. I'll give you mine since I hardly get a chance to use it.
I think I understand Councillor Deneen's process to this, and I think maybe I just need some clarification, maybe procedurally from the Clerk Helmke on the previously approved motion or recommendations from the October 5th meeting. So if I were to bring back another report in March, with recommendations that had already been approved by council. I may be lost, and maybe for Sasha to maybe clarify that on procedurally how that would work. I'm just a little bit confused on that part of it, if you don't mind.
No problem. Clerk Elmkay, can you help us out there?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think this will help clarify for Councillor McKechnie as well. Procedurally, Councillor Dineen's motion is perfect for staff to move forward. To Dan's point, for clarification from the October 5th meeting, those resolutions do stand. They are contingent on budget approval, which we do know that there is possible funding here without increasing taxations. So Dan's reports on the March 7th meeting, they were more outlined the exact amount of funds that it would cost to put those signs up, reiterating the approved motions from October 5th of the actual locations and where the speed limits were to be changed. And a part of that report would be the draft bylaw. So obviously those 3 roads that were the first ones approved at the October 5th meeting, so I believe that was Fairgrounds Road, Concession 10, and Concession 6, those would be the first ones in Dan's report. Also approved at that October 5th meeting was that staff consider, and it was a list of different roads for 2022. So if there was additional funding left, Dan would be coming back to council saying these were the roads that you asked us to consider. Please prioritize these roads. And if you want to see speed reductions, but that analysis and report would be in relation to the traffic assessment study and allow for some public input.
Okay, Dan, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, that's sheds a bit more clarity on what I have to do coming back.
Okay.
But I do want to let council know that I had gone through that exercise before I submitted the October 5th report, is to find out how much, and I can detail it if council wishes on what a cost per sign is, what a cost per post is, what a cost to provide the staff needed and the equipment needed to, I can detail that out if council chooses or wants that information. But essentially it is, and I've explained this before, about $400 per sign. So yeah. I can come back with that information if that's council wants and needs.
Okay, so my commentary for that quickly, Dan, would be that we need to, as council, need to have confidence that we're passing resolutions that are complete and are accurate to be transparent to the public. If I recall our discussions, particularly Councillor McKechnie's recommendation on the 6th concession piece, we weren't exactly sure on the address, so we didn't know exactly what the distance was that we were going to be speaking about. So we needed some clarity on that. This gives you, as a staff member, an opportunity to prepare a report that gives those exact information and then offers that information up. The clerk will then prepare a bylaw that'll be associated with it. Council will debate it. If the resolution passes and the bylaw passes, the final step is that the mayor and clerk sign it and it becomes a bylaw. And so we, this is just all part of being accurate and transparent so the public know exactly what it is that we're doing. Okay, I saw a couple of cards flashing there. I've just missed who it was. I'll go to Tom first. Oh, I see Mr. Lamers. Nice to see you, John. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I just, to me, it's a simple and it's a good way of doing it. As I see it, my motions would have done exactly the same thing except for my particular interest, the Fairgrounds Road and Riverside and Concession 6. And if I could be bold enough to say that would serve Councillor McKechnie as well, because the simple statement that we're preserving what we agreed to on October 5th covers all of that. So, but I do want to ask for a clarification, because several times, and this is to you, Mayor, you seem to, well, first of all, those recommendations were made at a regular council meeting. It was a special meeting, not regular, but it wasn't a workshop. October 5th was a special meeting.
Special meeting, traffic was the topic. It was a specific workshop meeting. It was a workshop
Well,
meeting,
no,
special
it
meeting.
wasn't a workshop meeting in the sense that this is a workshop meeting, as you're using the phrase. This was a special meeting, and so those motions stand, as the Clerk Hemke said, because I think we're fully accountable there.
We're fully accountable for every motion we make. The point is that when we're in a workshop, we can amend and have conversation and perhaps be a little more casual in the way we present. My point is still sticks that a report with a motion followed by a bylaw is done at a council meeting, a proper council meeting, and that's where we
I'm not
bring it,
debating
present.
that. Yeah,
So
I'm not debating that point at all.
The motions that we presented, while they're valid motions, have not been followed up with any bylaw. So there needs to be a report and then a bylaw, and that's the proper procedure.
But yes, and that's always been our understanding. Anytime it's been said to us before, and we all understand that anytime we change the speed below 80, that we have to follow it up with a bylaw. So this is completely inconsistent with the process that we anticipated on October 5th. Okay, so I just wanted to make that point. So I'm comfortable with it the way it is, and I don't think to Dan's point that we're litigating the motions of the 5th. They stand, and all we're doing, as the motion said, was answering the pending budget approval in this way, which I like. I like. It's done in its totality.
Okay. I've got nothing further. Is anybody else? Councillor Lamers, I saw your card up. Did you want to jump in?
Thank you, Worship. Back in July 13, 2020, I made a motion for 1213 side road for speed reduction there. And on October 5th, it wasn't added. So I was going to make a motion today for reduction on that road. And I was asking Clerk Helmke or Dan if this was added into his second list, if he had excess money left over.
Clerk Helmke, do you have a comment on that, or Dan?
Yes, it's in there.
Go ahead, Clerk.
I'll just speak to procedurally. So through your worship to Councillor Lamers, procedurally at this meeting, because it's related to the budget, adding an additional road for speed reduction, it wouldn't be appropriate at this meeting. It would be something we would need to consider through a staff report or a request from council or notice of motion for staff to provide a report to council in relation to the analysis and the traffic assessment study. But I believe Dan can speak to whether this road's been identified and if it would be included in any of his reports regarding other considered roads.
Mr. Perot. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Worship, to Councillor Lamers. I believe, I can't recall what motion or what recommendation it was. I think maybe number four. Yeah.
Number 4. I have it in front of me.
On the October 5th, so there were additional roads that were to be possibly reviewed in the future. Now the motion said 2022, anticipating that the 3 that were passed would have been implemented in 2021, right. I guess. But maybe, again, if Councillor Dineen's motion passes, then I'll come with all of those roads listed out. If that's what council wants me to do, is to come, I guess, with essentially a list of those roads that were in the report that were mentioned. 1213 is in there as well. And then it's, again, back to what John has referred to is council has to make those decisions based on the funds available in the budget.
Thank you. Councillor Lamers, is that comfortable?
Yeah.
All right. So we can talk about that at a regular council meeting, or you can discuss it with the staff offline and see how he fits that into the item 4 of those recommendations. Is that right? Thank you, Councillor Lamers. I saw Councillor Patterson again.
No,
Go ahead.
I'm okay. I'm okay. You answered the question.
All right. And Mr. McKechnie. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we, October 13th, we, had the motions and recommendations, and we passed all those. And then at December 13th budget, the funding was taken away from, for the speed limit signs. And then we had in January, January the 13th, something like that, or anyway, no, I guess it was December the 13th. Anyway, we had the public meeting, and where we got the feedback from the public, and the only feedback that we got from the public was for concession 10 and also the area in front of the 6-line church. This meeting is supposed to, today, this workshop, we are supposed to amend the budget based on the public feedback.
Yep.
We got public feedback on those 2 roads. So,
Yep.
Now you're saying that we're not going to follow the procedure. We're going to defer it till March the 7th or something. This meeting is, we're supposed to amend the budget based on the public feedback. And those were the 2 motions that I was prepared to put forward, was based on the public feedback. So I just don't see how, if we defer this until March the 7th to get more information from Dan, he's already done it. He's told us it's going to cost $50,000, and the CAO says we do have the money. So I'm really uncomfortable with this motion. And, but anyway, so that's my 2 cents worth. I'm a bit disappointed that we're not following the proper procedure as laid out in the budget process. So anyway.
Actually, we are. We're absolutely answering the comments from the questions from the public. We've answered them by having the staff review where funding can be applied to meet the requirements of what staff or what the council direction is, Councillor McKechnie. And so the objective of the motion that reduced the overall tax impact by reducing the $50,000 is still valid, in the fact that the objective of council is to keep the tax increase low. So they are using their best abilities as staff to present to us as council some opportunities for us to be able to do what we need without raising taxes. I think we're meeting it, Councillor McKechnie, so I disagree with your analysis on it.
Okay, thank you very much. I disagree with your analysis. So anyway, so we'll agree to disagree. I just think that we're not following the budget process, because it says in black and white that this meeting is to be used to amend the budget based on the public feedback. We've had the public feedback. I think it's time to amend the budget.
Okay.
But anyway.
Okay, so of the four items that were brought up as reviewed in the treasurer's report, all of the items have been addressed. I believe, with the exception of even the question of the raising of the fees on the transit system. That question hasn't even been put to anybody here at this council table yet, but I want to point out that all other items have already been addressed. So, all right. Back to the discussion of the motion at hand. I see Councillor Patterson's got his card up again. Go ahead. Sorry, I think you're muted again there.
I didn't think I was going to say anything else. Just for my motions, just perhaps it would help Councillor McKechnie. I see no need now, if we were to adopt Councillor Dineen's motion, to present mine. Because, and for procedurally, if my motion was to be approved today separately, it would still be subject to a meeting and a report from Dan that would include the bylaw. So it's still streamlined. I sort of agree with Dan. I'm not sure what council's asking him more to do, because it was a fairly simple need to estimate. So the only question I would have is what it would take to March 7th. I'm okay with March 7th because these things were still going to be done in 2022 and it still allows time. So I would urge council to simply adopt this much more streamlined and comprehensive process, and I see all my objectives being met in this process without
Thank you,
having.
Councillor. All right, thank you. Nothing further? Anybody else? I don't see any of the cards. Madam Clerk, for review, since we don't have it printed in front of us here, do you want to outline the motion as presented?
Thank you, Mayor Measures. So the motion before council, moved by Councillor Deneen, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Be it resolved that staff be directed to prepare a report to council for the exact costing of the speed reduction implementations approved by council at the October 5th, 2021 meeting, and that the cost not be funded from an increase to taxation, but from budgeted operational funds as deemed appropriate by staff, and that the report be brought back to council at the March 7th, 2022 meeting.
All right, council, you've heard the motion. We've had a really good debate. Councillor Patterson, go ahead.
Friendly amendment, if I can, as the seconder, I'm not sure. That or sooner.
Let's leave that up to the direction of the CAO and the clerk as to whether we can get it on our budget. So I think in February we only have one meeting. Is that right? I think there is only, so it may not make February, but
There you
Dan,
go.
go ahead. Yes, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, just maybe some comfort for council. I have no problem coming back on March 7th. Logistically, now that we're into the end of January, February, realistically, we're going to have to wait till spring thaw anyway to install these signs now. So if that's peace of mind for council on timing, but just with winter maintenance operations and ground freeze and whatnot, just a logistic thing. That's some comfort for council, hopefully.
Yeah. All right. Again, multiple steps to try to get something done here. Nothing further from members of council. Councillor Deneen, Councillor Patterson, I'm prepared to call the motion. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? And then that will carry. Thank you very much. That motion will carry. All right, so we will look forward to some reports coming to our future council meeting outside of the workshop. So at this point, are there any further council proposed motions? We're at item 4 of our agenda. They'd like to bring forward for the 2022 budget. Kelly McDonald is standing by, waiting to write. Okay, I'm going to go to Mr. Walker first. Hello, Mr. Walker. How are you?
Good afternoon, Your Worship, but not really a motion. You brought up, I have two. First of all, I'll talk about the road signs, our speed signs, reduction signs. You've heard me make this comment before. I have a feeling that when we move forward with our speed reduction signs, it's not going to achieve what the residents feel it will achieve. So I'm asking you, Your Worship, and the CAO, that when you talk with CPAC, it's not CPAC anymore, is there an opportunity to enter into an enforcement contract with OPP? In other words, if we take 50 or 60,000 in another year, is there an opportunity to enter into an enforcement type contract that would enable us to enforce our reductions in our roads? Because right now, as we all know, the manpower of the OPP and the ability to do what they have to do is not able. They're not able to. So that's my question. It's just food for thought. I don't want to increase the budget this year, but I'm thinking it's something that we need to maybe, if our speed reduction doesn't work, maybe we need to look at that if that's a possibility to move forward with that type of a scenario.
I'll tell you what, Councillor Walker, I appreciate you bringing that up. It's very timely. The CAO and I will be meeting with the OPP in a CPAC forum in a couple of weeks, I think. I'm not sure. Jen has got something scheduled for us. But if you recall, Council supported a resolution that was brought forth by the province of Ontario to establish a new board, actually, for to provide advice to the detachment and to the OPP and working with our neighbors in the town of Wasaga Beach, Township of Springwater, the three municipalities will be establishing a new board. So that may in fact trigger some more discussion about that very point, about the level of service. I'm encouraged to tell you that a new interim detachment commander has been very good at communicating with me, and actually I understand communicating with other members of our staff as well, to give some updates on activities of the police in all levels of enforcement, not specifically speed. So I think there's changes coming to the OPP. So thank you for the timely ask, and I'll put it to the CAO to make sure we have that conversation, and we'll be able to bring that forward in a future year. Okay, Councillor Walker? Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, and the other thing was, you highlighted on it quickly, it was a question by the public, transit fees.
Yes.
Has there been any consideration with regards to the increase in transit fees?
Thank you. I did bring it up because it was the only item that wasn't really discussed. So Mr. CAO, and Dan's here. Hello, Dan. I know that Dan looks after it. John, we'll get back to you in a minute. Dan, what's your comment on our transit operation and fees?
Thank you, Worship. And yeah, through to Councillor Walker. It is quite timely, and it came to my surprise, again, only being here for 2 and a bit years, that I was contacted by town of Wasaga Beach, and I've come to learn and to know that when we began our transit operations here in Clearview, that we partnered up in partnership with town of Wasaga Beach. That contract that Wasaga Beach had, that we piggybacked on to start our operation, is up in June of this year. So in fact, since the new year, I've had a couple of conversations with the town of Collingwood and the town of Wasaga Beach, and we are looking to form a bit of a joint partnership on the operations side. So essentially getting a new contractor, or possibly the same contractor, but going to tender with a tri-party type of tender. So with knowing that, definitely gonna have to come back to council at some point to initiate a contract or a tender to have a new transit provider, or renew with the same transit provider. So we definitely will look at transit fares at that time, once we know what our new contract will look like. Hope that answers the question, but we definitely, at some point, probably, I'm gonna say maybe April, we'll probably report back to council once a tender has closed, and we know specifics on what it's going to cost to operate our transit for the next 5 years.
Okay. Councillor Walker, you're comfortable with that? Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Dan.
All right. Additional commentary on that point too is that at the Mayor CAO forum, transit is a regular item that's discussed between, as far as Meaford and Town of Blue Mountains and Collingwood and Wasaga Beach and Clearview. We have had discussions about that, and there's a pretty complicated way to go from Stayner all the way to Thornbury. I don't know if you knew that, but there is an actual path you could do that and ride transit. So it's we need to work that out as a group of mayors, and certainly the staff in all of these towns who are responsible for transit are looking to that as well. All right, Councillor McKechnie, did I see your card? Yes.
Yes, you did. Thank you. So first, thank you, Your Worship. So just first of all, a comment, and then I have a question for the Director of Finance. So in response to Councillor Walker's comment regarding enforcement and such, and I hear you, and I think that's enforcement is part of it. But we have to remember too that one of the reasons why we are asking for speed reductions, particularly on concession 10, is to make it so that the algorithm and the GPS routing reduces, that makes that a secondary route to get to Blue Mountain. Right now, that's a primary route from Toronto to Blue Mountain. And that's a local road, and in the official plan, through traffic is not to be used on, not to travel on local roads. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking for the 60 kilometer per hour speed limit on that road, is order to get that algorithm changed such that that becomes a secondary route to Toronto. But we'll be dealing with that, I suppose, at the March 7th meeting. Anyway, my question for the Director of Finance is, we had some public feedback at the public meeting regarding the Sunnydale Street sewage process, or project, I should say. Have we put it to bed, the money in that OCFI fund, or OFCI, or whatever it is, fund, can we definitely not use that to assist lowering the costs for the residents any longer? So I just want to make sure that we can't use that money. I think at the last meeting it was sort of discussed, but I didn't get a definitive answer. So
You're right, Councillor McKechnie, it was discussed. I can go to the clerk, sorry, not the clerk, the treasurer. I know that Mike Ron is on our call as well. Maybe he might want to jump in as well. But go ahead, Kelly. Do you have any response?
Through your worship to Councillor McKechnie, we have not earmarked any of the OCIF funding for that particular project. The OCIF funding is geared towards township-wide infrastructure. Using it for a project such as this, it wouldn't be my recommendation. It is, of course, up to council, but it is meant for township-wide infrastructure, renewal, improvements, replacements, that type of situation.
Yeah.
Mr. Ron would like to weigh in on his knowledge of the projects.
Certainly, through the CAO and Mike Ron, I know you guys have both worked on this project. Mike, welcome. Did you have a comment?
Just to reiterate what the treasurer said, so the OSTEF funding it's really supposed to be for, expansion of the township, things that would facilitate maybe some employment, or building some infrastructure that's not just, Sunnydale Street is one street within a large township with a lot of infrastructure requirements. The way I've always seen it, and the way I interpret the wording of the OSTEF funding is that it's for more of a holistic view. So something that would make a large benefit to a number of people. Maybe you're downtown, or a water infrastructure or sewer infrastructure project that would help hundreds of people and not tens of people, that kind of thing. Would also like to, just remind council too that there was a pretty large break to the residents from the developers on that street as well, that most people haven't gotten when infrastructure improvements have been made on their streets.
Right. All right. Mr. Ferguson, I'm not sure if you had something to say on that too, or not.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. The practice of the municipality, Clearview Township, over the years is that they've not contributed to those areas where there's a frontage cost from when infrastructure goes in front of your property. Typically, it's always been the property owner has to pay. And that's how it's been handled for years, apparently, in the township, and possibly even before then. So if you did make a decision, and it's questionable whether or not it is approvable, but if you did make the decision, you would be setting a precedent and likely would be asked to fund other projects, and probably quite difficult to say no if you did that. So the OCIF funding, which right now is $600,000, that's a benefit to the whole community. So if we put that into any type of capital work or infrastructure work that we're working on, that benefits basically about 9,000 property owners, not a lot per property owner. And in the Sunnydale circumstance, it's about 70 property owners, to give a comparison of how the community would benefit from that. So generally, building on what Mike Ron said, it's meant to really be for the greater population. And it's not something the municipality has done in the past, and it would create a precedent going forward.
right, thank you, Mr. CAO. Mr. McKechnie, all good with your question?
Yeah, all good. Yeah, sure.
Okay,
It's fine.
thank you very much. Is anybody else was there another card? I've just been moving my screen and I didn't catch. Okay, nothing further. Oh, yes, Councillor Patterson. Okay, go ahead. You've disappeared. He was there. Oh, he's there again.
Here I am. All right,
Okay.
so I just wanted to follow up on Councillor Walker said. I thank him for keeping an eye on the enforcement. It's an important part of what we're trying to do in general, and it is totally complementary and I think necessary to any speed reductions that we do. And what we're deciding here is what speed they're going to enforce. But I agree 100%. There are going to be people that continue to practice driving as they have. And there's going to be a transition period. Now, we did discuss this a time ago that we were going to meet with the OPP, and I'm glad to hear the mayor is working with CPAC, PIPPAC. Also, I think we also talked about the transition, the education program that's required as we move from towards a better traffic management, and enforcement's part of it. And so I'm hoping that we have a discussion that brings all of these things together. And for the public to appreciate and there'll be an adjustment period to go through. And I think I don't think the enforcement should be seen as punitive. I think it should be as complementary to the road safety that we're trying to do. That's the message I think we should be trying to get. So thanks, Councillor Walker, for doing that.
All right, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Council, again, I'm for the last call. I will call. Is there anything further? Oh, yes, Councillor Lamers. May not be the last call then. Hello, Councillor Lamers.
Now's the time to make a motion for a sidewalk.
What's your recommendation?
Okay.
What's your motion?
I'd like to make a motion to add 300 meters of sidewalk along County Road 9 between Edgewood and Parkway Crescent for a cost of approximately $40,000 and to come from this sidewalk budget.
All right. Now, before I go for a seconder, Mr. Perot or the CAO, do you have any questions or comments to the mover on that motion?
And Dan would be more helpful, but he mentioned County Road 9. Is it a county road?
Yes, we reviewed that, Mr. CAO, prior to you joining us, that if we needed to do those type of works on a county road, we have to fund them. You can't go to the county on that. So that's already been investigated, so to speak. Mr. Perot, can you have a look at your recommendations or your areas of the sidewalk budget to help Mr. Lamers?
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, to Councillor Lamers. So you're talking the next chunk, the next block, I guess, would be kind of the last block, I guess, where the trail is. Is that what you're talking, John? Or Councillor Lamers?
Yeah, you did one section 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and now take this one to the next.
This would be the last. This kind of the last section before you start heading out of town.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we can handle that within the existing capital budget. I think it's about 200,000 in there right now. So we can add that section to the overall tender for 2022. That shouldn't be a problem. No extra funds would be needed.
Okay, no extra funds would be needed. That's the words that I like to hear. Councillor Lamers, you're comfortable with that explanation before I even ask for a full motion?
Yep, that's good.
All right. Now,
Thank
before I leave you, I'm going to go to Kelly first. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you, Your Worship, if I may. Our sidewalks have been funded from OCF for quite some time. So this is the perfect type of project. It's an addition to Dan's existing capital budget. So if it turns out that he does need to go a little bit over on that, it's already funded from OCIF, and the additional funding can come from there as well.
All right, so that actually brings even more comfort to me. So Mr. Lamers, I'd ask you to put your motion on the floor, and then I'll ask for a seconder to have it added to Mr. Perot's list of work. So that's he's moving it. Is there a seconder on the motion? Seconder is Mr. Deputy Mayor. Madam Clerk, you record what that motion is? You're okay? All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Measures. I was wondering if Councillor Lamers could just repeat his motion so I can just get the last part.
Yeah, okay.
All right. I would like to make a motion to add 300 meters of sidewalk along County Road 9 in New Lowell between Edgewood Drive and Parkway Crescent for a cost of approximately 40,000 to come from the sidewalk budget.
Madam Clerk, you comfortable?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mayor Measures.
All right, Deputy Mayor is a seconder. I see Councillor Patterson. Yes, Tom.
Just a procedural question since we're doing amendments to the budget or additions to the budget.
Yep.
But we've already indicated that it's within the existing budget. Do we need actually a motion? And the reason I ask, I don't mind the belt and suspenders part of it, is that there will be, I suspect that there will be some requests that come from the public in 2022 when we start looking at the traffic calming, because one of the issues, separate but associated with traffic calming on a street, is especially one that is without a sidewalk.
Yes.
So are we setting up the precedent that within the budget, the 200,000 or whatever, that each of these requests will be done through a council approved addition, or do we simply work with staff to see if it can be accommodated when we're looking at traffic calming?
All right. So, Tom, not to get too terribly complicated here, I look at it that this motion on the floor, Dan has acknowledged that he can do this. It's within the ability of Tim to do this type of work within the budget envelope that he has for that category. We got some support from Kelly to indicate we can draw from OCIF. Back to our original point, if he was overextended in that category, the CAO can bring a recommendation to access OCIF. Council can approve that. So to me, it makes sense that we're doing it. I think what's happening by Councillor Lamer putting on the floor, it's actually solidifying that council has a direction that they want to put this on Mr. Perot's list. That's my interpretation of what's happening here. Councillor Lamers, you comfortable with that? Yep. Okay. Anybody else with anything further then on this motion? All right, Madam Clerk, do you want to reread it, or are we comfortable, everybody?
I can reread it if council would like me to.
Sure.
Just one moment. So moved by Councillor Lamer, seconded by Deputy Mayor Burton. Be it resolved that council directs staff to add 300 meters of sidewalk along County Road 9 between Edgewood Drive and Parkwood Crescent for a cost of approximately $40,000 to come from the sidewalk budget.
Nothing further from anybody? I'll call the motion. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. Those are nice projects to have added on with that don't impact the overall tax increase. Anybody else with anything else? This is again, I'm looking for last call in section 4. Then I'm going to close section 4. I thank you, council, for all of your motions. Council, we're going to go to item number 5, which is our direction to the treasurer, which is in regards to preparing the final budget and the tax rate bylaw. As you know, I, as your mayor, often ask for motions to be complete. And so I can now complete this motion by, underneath item number 2, putting in the words 2.44%, which is the number that was presented by Kelly McDonald. I just want Kelly to confirm that. Kelly?
Yes, Your Worship, you have the correct percentage, 2.44 net tax increase.
Okay, so now I have a complete motion. So I'm going to read the motion and I'll look for a mover and seconder for Madam Clerk to record. Recommendation be resolved that Council of the Township of Clearview hereby 1, receive the 2022 budget overview presentation by the treasurer for information. And item 2, approve the 2022 budget with any amendments provided at budget workshop number 3 with a net increase of 2.44%. And item 3, direct the treasurer to prepare the final budget package and tax rate bylaw for approval. Council, can I have a mover and seconder on this motion, please? Moved by Councillor Broderick, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Thank you very much. Anything to add or discuss about this recommendation? Yes, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to make a comment,
Sure.
and probably not a favorable comment, but I feel it's necessary to be said. I will not be supporting this budget. And the reason is I feel that we are artificially decreasing the budget by removing funds that should be going into funding for our long-term, our senior citizens reserve. And I feel that's an important issue that we should be doing. And I feel that when we take that money out of that budget, we're artificially reducing the budget, which is not realistic. And as a result, I'm not going to support the budget. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments, Deputy Mayor. Anybody else with any questions or comments about the motion as presented? Mayor, or sorry, Mr. McKechnie. Councilor McKechnie.
Thank you, Your Worship. So getting back to Councillor Dineen's motion, so we've deferred a good portion of this budget, the $50,000 speed limit signs for speed limit signs and everything, which we've been debating for a number of months now, to March the 7th. So isn't it premature now to vote on the actual budget itself, because we don't know what Dan's going to be coming back with. We don't know how we're going to vote on March the 7th. We don't know what roads we're going to do. Is it not premature to vote on the budget today to approve it?
If you look at the motion and hear the motion, Councillor McKechnie, it is to direct the treasurer to prepare the final budget package and tax rate bylaw for approval. What that means is that the staff will now take this direction to prepare all of the documents, prepare the actual bylaw, present it to council at a future council meeting, and that's when an actual tax rate will be passed. At our last council meeting, full council meeting, we passed an interim tax bylaw, which allowed the Treasury Department to go ahead and apply tax notices and actually collect some taxation already for this season. That motion did allow taxation to continue so we can have income at this time. So this is just another step in moving that forward so that the treasurer will able to present the balanced budget with the fully updated information of which council can receive. And if you recall, actually, the treasurer mentioned it may change a little bit, given that the numbers of growth may change and or other funding sources may show up. So it's her best recommendation. Does that help?
Yeah, more or less. That's fine. That's an interpretation. Yep, that's good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other members of council with any questions? All right, seeing none, I'm prepared to call the motion. Thank you, members of council. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? And that'll be duly noted. Thank you very much. That carries. And thank you again to the Treasury Department, to the CAO, and to all of our staff and senior managers, junior managers who have all contributed to get us to this point. And thank you, council, for all your work on this very important document. It's significant work that we have to do, and I'm glad that we do it. And it's sometimes complicated to pay attention to all the acrobatics you have to do to balance the budget. Thank you. At this time, our agenda was amended to include a closed session. So we're about to go to a closed session. I do want to take a moment of privilege, if I may, just to speak on one thing, and that is that at the beginning of the meeting, I notified council of something that happened in our community early today. During the process of this meeting, I've actually received notification that I'm given advice that I can give notice. And that is that we've had the passing of a significant gentleman in our community, Mr. Robert Coxon, who was a businessman and a volunteer and a member of the Legion and very active at the Edenvale Airport. So certainly our condolences go to the Coxon family and to Jane and Monica and the whole family. We feel for them, and our community will certainly mourn the loss of our friend Robert Coxon. Okay, council, at this time, I'd like to go to our closed session recommendation. We're going to go to closed session. And so I'll read the recommendation and then I'll look for a mover and second. Recommendation be it resolved that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with S239-2 of the Municipal Act 2001. It is item K, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be performed on behalf of the municipality or local board. And it's in regard to a development proposal negotiations. So at this time, I'll look for a mover and second, please. Mr. Broderick, Mr. Lamers, thank you very much. And I'll call the motion. All those in favor? All right, thank you. This council will recess to in camera, and we will return